Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer. All of the Kentucky Derby prep races have been completed. It's time to profile some of the top contenders. And the horse that's likely to be the morning line favorite for the Kentucky Derby is last year's two-year-old champion, Forte, because last year's two-year-old champ, he's come back roaring at 2 for 2, including this victory in the Florida Derby. And he had to work a little bit in this race, Mike. Swings to the far outside, runs down the promising Mage. I still think he won this race a little bit easier than it looks. He has a lot of work to do, and I think he gets by this horse pretty easily up front. But I think there were some folks that were disappointed off this effort. It might actually help his price slightly on Derby Day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, he felt like when he came back for his first start as a 3-year-old there in the Fountain of Youth, and he looked so good winning that day that maybe he really was going to sort of be a standout favor in the Derby. Maybe that's not going to be the case now after they've run that race that we just watched, the Florida Derby, because he did work pretty hard for a long way in there. He did ultimately get it done, and I agree with you. I thought he ultimately got it done maybe a little bit easier than it looks. But it still didn't come back a very fast race. He still has run twice now and hasn't improved on his best numbers as a 2-year-old. And I think those are the kinds of things that people are going to look at when they say, well, do I really want a short price on this horse in a 20-horse Derby field?
Is that something that worries you? He's one of only a handful of horses in this crop that will go into the Derby with one triple-digit buyer on his page. That, of course, was in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. Since then, 98 Fountain of Youth, 95 Florida Derby. Does that put some questions in your mind?
I mean, I think it has to put some questions in everybody's mind, because if only because you're talking about the Derby favorite, Dan. And so when they're going to offer you a short price on a horse in a 20-horse field, especially one that doesn't really have any kind of an edge when you start talking about speed figures, I think you want to, at least tread a little bit lightly with horses like that. Personally, I kind of like what I've seen from Forte so far in his 2 starts. And I guess I'm as concerned as everybody else is that he hasn't run a fast race yet, although figures are never going to be the deciding factor for me, Dan. I really liked his first start back from the layoff. I don't think he ran as poorly as some people think he did in the Florida Derby that we just watched. And I just always have to remind myself, and sometimes I forget to do it, but I always have to remind myself, I try not to put too much stock in really good-looking performances at Gulfstream Park, and I try not to put too much stock in sort of poor-looking performances at Gulfstream Park. I don't believe anything that happens at that track.
He ticks so many boxes, Forte. 6 for 7 lifetime, 4 for 4 around 2 turns. He has won at 1 1/8. He has a nice pedigree by Violence out of a Blame mare. The way he finishes up his races doesn't seem to make you think that 1 1/4 is going to be any sort of a problem. He is just a solid professional horse. I think that has matured from 2 to 3, even though the figures haven't exactly shown it. What price is fair for you if you had to bet Forte to win in the Kentucky Derby? 20-horse field, considering his accomplishments, considering his connections, what do you need to take on a horse like this? 7 to 2, 4 to 1, 9 to 2, or not at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to take anything on him. We'll see what kind of price he is. And, if you're asking me what price should he be, I really have no idea, Dan. I think he should be the favorite in the race. I don't think he's going to be a horse who's going to be even as short as 5 to 2 on Derby. I think you're going to do better than that if you like him, but just because I don't think on paper anyway, I don't think he necessarily stands out as when compared to some of his main competition in that field. So we'll see what kind of price he is. Again, you don't have to take any price on him. If there's somebody else that you like, I don't think you should be, terrified to bet against Forte, but I personally think he's the horse to beat anyway.
Irad Ortiz has been aboard for all 7 lifetime starts for trainer Todd Pletcher. He's owned by Rapoli Stable and St. Elias Stable, and he's likely to be the morning line favorite for the Kentucky Derby. And it's hard to poke any holes in Forte, other than the fact that he's just run some slower races since his Breeders' Cup Juvenile. We'll see Forte on the first Saturday in May.